If you are asking me what the biggest flaw in Horikita Suzune character is, then you could find the answer in Volume 5 second year arc, where she insists on keeping Kushida in school even though she has already betrayed the class multiple times, resulting in the expulsion of the kind and big-hearted idol, Sakura Eri. Her choice to keep Kushida in school contradict her action in Volume 10 first year arc, where she chose to expel Yamochi for betraying the class. We could argue that Kushida is way more important than Yamochi, but no matter how useful Kushida for the class, the threat that she brings is even greater than her contribution, and it seems Horikita is not yet realized the consequence of her action. So, let's talk about the future where Kushida betrayed the class, and how it could change Horikita forever. First, let's talk about the reason behind Horikita action in Volume 5 second year arc. Long story short, there was a choice to expel someone for the exchange of 100 class points in the exam, and Kushida kept choosing the option to expel, even though everyone else chose not to expel. The vote was totally anonymous, so they didn't know who was the one who kept choosing expulsion. However, they need to reach a unanimous vote to finish the exam, or the class will lose 300 class points as a penalty. At the end, Ayanokoji chose to expose the traitor, and persuade the whole class to choose the option to expel someone. As the stage was already prepared, Ayanokoji began to expose Kushida using all the evidence he had collected. With all the undeniable evidence, Kushida can no longer maintain her angelic smile, and starts to show her true face. However, let's rewind time a bit and focus on what's going on inside Horikita's head. Even before Ayanokoji began to expose Kushida, Horikita must have realized that Kushida was the one who kept choosing for expulsion. Her goal is clear, which is to expel her from school because Horikita knows about Kushida's secret. With that in mind, Horikita was suddenly faced with two options, which were to let the class lose 300 class points or let herself get expelled. Horikita literally had no option to expel Kushida, because no one will believe in her word. Fortunately, Ayanokoji already saved enough evidence to expel Kushida, and when Kushida started to show her real face in front of everyone, another option opened up for Horikita, which was to expel Kushida from the school, and put every trouble that Kushida had done to her to an end. At that time, Horikita had three different options. To let the class lose 300 class points, expel Kushida from the school, or expel someone else in the place of Kushida. This is where Horikita starts to judge Kushida to determine her value. If Horikita choose option 1, the damage will be too big, and not even Kushida is worth 300 class points. If Horikita choose the second option, their class will lose Kushida, and Horikita believes 100 class points is not a fair trade to compensate for Kushida's wide social network and communication skills. Horikita believes that Kushida is worth more than that. At the end, Horikita chose the third option, which is to expel another student who is worth less than 100 class points, and keep Kushida in the school. Mathematically speaking, it's actually the best choice possible, because they still have Kushida but gain 100 class points. However, there are a few variables that could bring Horikita's calculation to hell, which is the human variable that Horikita was unfamiliar with. Back when Yamochi got expelled, everyone could accept that decision because Yamochi was betraying the class, so he just reaped the consequence of his action. However, Kushida's case is the total opposite. Literally everyone was opposed to that idea, and only agreed because they were running out of time. Horikita's decision put the class in a very disastrous condition, but somehow everything ended peacefully thanks to a lot of luck on Horikita's side. Kushida ended up cooperating thanks to Kushida, who chose to live in seclusion as long as she could graduate from Class A. Haruka and Akito expulsion could be prevented thanks to Sakura's quick action in buying the maid uniform for Haruka, and Kushida's stalking ability to find Sakura's social media account. And the internal conflict inside the class can be suppressed, but it is still lingering inside everyone's minds. Horikita fails to include the factor of risk in her calculation, but in the next few volumes, everything goes so smoothly to the point everyone forgets that Kushida is still a walking nuclear weapon. She contributed during the sports and cultural festival. She also joined the student council as vice president, and her wide information about the students is part of the reason they could win in Volume 10 second year arc. Kushida put on a smile, and during the trash talk from her classmate for the sake of graduating from Class A. She thought she could endure it as long as her suffering bore fruit, but Ayanokoji's transfer changed everything. Because she kept her mouth shut for the last 2 semesters, everyone forgot that Kushida is a ticking bomb waiting to be triggered, and Ayanokoji finally pushed that trigger in Volume 1 third year arc. So far, Horikita's decision to keep Kushida in school only brings a positive result, but everything must have a consequence, especially when Ayanokoji is involved. With Ayanokoji offered to Kushida in the last volume, and the possibility of Kushida's betrayal, Horikita's credibility as the leader will be tested once again. There will be a time when Horikita needs to look back at what she did in the past, and question whether Kushida is really worth 100 class points or not. And when that time came, that could become the real turning point for Horikita's character. And for better or worse, that is something that Horikita really needs. Let's take a look at Horikita as a character. From the newest update of the third year website, there is a quote from Horikita that somehow sounds like a declaration of war toward Ayanokoji. She said that as long as she has friends in her class, she could defeat anyone, no matter how big they are. Horikita's word is somehow true, because compared to other classes, Horikita class has more talented individuals in every aspect, and doesn't solely rely on their class leader like the other classes. Horikita's strongest aspect is the number of powerful allies she has inside the class, and because of that, the Horikita class was built with the concept of democracy. Everyone has their own voice, and even if Horikita has a different opinion, she cannot force it on the others like Ryuen or Sakayanagi. Ichinose class is actually similar, but Ichinose presence is just too strong to the point she could brainwash her classmate without she even realize. Back to Horikita, because her class was built that way, listening and negotiating became a daily occurrence. They were usually united by the same dream to graduate as Class A, but there are a few troublesome students such as Kushida and Koenji who need special attention. Their strength was undeniable, but whether they were willing to use it for the sake of the class is the problem. Back in Volume 5 second year arc, Horikita makes 2 different promises regarding these problematic students. The first one is she will transfer 10,000 points to Koenji as the exchange for his cooperation during the exam, and the second one is a promise with the whole class that she will expel the traitor. We knew that she broke the second promise, so what if she also breaks her promise with Koenji? If Kushida is really betraying the class, it wouldn't leave Horikita unscathed. After every effort she poured and all the food she cooked for her, Kushida's betrayal will be a wake-up slap for Horikita to realize that trust, friendship, and even promises mean nothing when a better offer comes to Kushida. When Horikita comes to realize it, her ideal will be shaken, and she probably will break some kind of mental barrier just like Ichinose. This is just my prediction, but because Horikita values her classmates and puts her trust in them, she will need to realize that her ideal is just naive when it comes to Kushida and Koenji. If we look at Koenji's quote from the newest update, he stated that he wouldn't budge no matter how hard she begged, and that should be enough for Horikita to rewrite her contract with Koenji. Horikita made a promise with Koenji to protect him if he get first place in the uninhabited island exam, and so far Horikita has kept her promise with him. However, if Kushida is really betraying the class, then there is no reason for Horikita to value another promise. Horikita could just ignore Koenji and use him as a sacrifice when it's needed. Even though she will lose the trust of her classmates, no one will judge her as long as they could get a victory, just like when Meizono got expelled. Even though we didn't know what Koenji's goal is, the thing that he avoided the most was expulsion, and Horikita should have realized that. If she is actively trying to expel Koenji in the special exam, Koenji will have no choice but to contribute to at least secure his position in school, and that is probably the best choice to force Koenji to act. However, this could only happen if Horikita had a dark development just like Ichinose. After getting betrayed, she wouldn't mind to also betraying someone else. Horikita probably adored Ichinose as a leader, and tried to become just like her, but ever since she expelled Yamochi from school, that path toward Ichinose was already destroyed, and even until this day, Horikita still needs to figure out what kind of leader she wanted to be. She is not naturally gifted like Sakayanagi or mentally deviant like Ryuen, but she has her friends that she could rely on. However, Ichinose had her class fall into Class D because of her ideal, and it took quite a disturbing path for Ichinose to find a middle way between her ideal and her goal. Perhaps Horikita also need to find middle way to achieve her goal between her ideal. In the past, Ayanokoji is that middle way, but in the third year arc, everything will be different. Of course, this is just a prediction. There is also a possibility where Horikita's trust in Kushida bears fruit, and everything goes so smoothly that they successfully graduate from Class A. However, that kind of ending is just plain boring. Ayanokoji had proven that no one could win against him by using a straight and respectable method. The reason why the class leaders have changed is exactly because of Ayanokoji, and this time it will be Horikita's turn to undergo that dark path. Horikita will have her friends to help her walk that path, but are they enough to keep her maintaining her ideal and sanity? The answer will be worth waiting for.